October 25th, 2021. A car spins out of control on the Linstead bypass in St. Catherine, Jamaica. It carries 4 people. 3 are policemen, one of which is a young constable who dies on impact. The 4th, a man some worshipped and others feared.
Everybody wants to touch our family.
Kevin Smith, self-styled bishop, cult leader, and alleged mastermind of human sacrifice rituals, was being transported from Montego Bay to Kingston to be charged with murder, but he never made it. Or did he?
But I have the right to defend my life, and if it means that I have to put you back into the ground from whence you came, it means I'm going to have to send you on to hell very, very quickly. Hear me and hear me well. It is a time of a great woe and another woe.
Kevin O'Neil Smith led the Pathways International Kingdom Restoration Ministries in Montego Bay, a church that will become the scene of one of Jamaica's most disturbing mass arrests in decades. Kevin Smith migrated to Canada in 1993, where he was educated and later ordained a minister of the gospel at 17 years old. A year later, he was ordained the national evangelist for Canada by its bishops. But Smith's story was as controversial as his rise to power, because on November 5th, 2007, the minister was convicted of 1 count of sexual assault of a 21-year-old man for which he served 6 months in a Canadian prison. By 2011, he had returned to Jamaica with the title doctor and re-established himself as a spiritual leader ready to rebuild his empire of faith, his community of Target, the quiet community of Albion in St. James.
One day, there were 2 tractors that came up the road and they go across there, and the noise was affecting 2 ladies over there who were senior citizens. And they called me and said to me, "Miss Vicky, you know where that noise coming from?" So I told them, and I tell them what is happening, that the people them were digging up the place to make a church over there. So them say, "What, Miss Vicky? We don't have," then they never drop a petition from the community. I say, "Yes, I did one." Just about 8 persons from Albion course that signed. Residents from Earl Drive signed. Some people of Paradise Way and the people them down the bottom of Albion signed. And anyway, I sent it to the parish council, but I don't know what come of it. So when I met Kevin that time and they started with his digging up of the place, I used to tell him that it's going to be very affected to a lot of people in the community because we have quite a lot of senior citizens living in the area. He said, "No, man, Albion is going to be a wonderful place. When I finish with Albion, I'm going to put Albion on the map."
Smith referred to himself as His Excellency. He told his followers to call him Daddy, Father, and later His Majesty, believing himself to be a king. To his followers, he was divine, a prophet, a messiah. To the police, he was a suspect, the alleged mastermind behind rituals that shocked a nation.
He tried to draw the people them into him because Christmas time and school, back to school, he's always distributing gifts. During the festive season, I see him down there giving out things. People take it, of course. You have to call him Your Excellency. You can't just say, no, not even Mr., not even Bishop, not Pastor. You have to say, His Excellency, Honorable, another thing, and then you say Bishop Smith. Bishop Kevin Smith.
Smith's teachings were highly unconventional. He spoke of an ark, a vessel that would carry his followers to salvation. The price for this salvation? $100,000. His first call for his followers to board the ark came just 1 week after Jamaica confirmed its first case of COVID-19, just months before the bloody events that would unfold.
You know, he had mentioned it once, and I heard him talk about it on the radio, that we are going to have a new ark, and the ark is going to leave in Jamaica. It's going to dock out by near, what do you call it, White House. I recall him saying that everybody went and baptized that Sunday, you know. I went to a funeral, and when I came back from the funeral, that's when I saw the people, them coming out of this big bus, all in white. And no time afterwards, the fracas, they start.
October 17, 2021. The ark is loading now. 123 Albion Road. Leave immediately. Dressed in white. That was the last of 2 messages shared on Smith's Facebook page, a platform he often used to communicate with his congregation. The other warned followers that a flood was coming, and those who were sealed the day before were to run immediately.
And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood. Now, the only thing I know that can create a flood is a tsunami.
What was supposed to be a 3-day convention turned into a deadly nightmare. Congregants were told to leave behind phones, IDs, and the unspoken request, reason. Inside the church, Kevin Smith ordered what he called a cleansing. But what happened next was beyond comprehension. 2 members were brutally murdered. Tanika Gardner and Michael Brown both died believing Smith had the power to bring them back. Gardner believed Smith was next to God, sacrificing herself to prove her loyalty. Brown, suffering from kidney failure, had his medical tubes ripped out by Smith in a desperate hope for healing. Now, more than 3 years later, they remain unresurrected. Outside, chaos erupted. Police were reportedly fired upon as they approached the building. A church member was gunned down while allegedly attacking lawmen with a knife. The outcome? 42 members of the church were arrested.
I heard gunshots, and when I looked through the window, I saw like when somebody throws a stone in a pigeon coop, and people, I see the pigeon them flying out. That's how I saw people jumping across the fence. And I said, what the hell is going on? And I said to myself, I wonder if it's the men them that Kevin always have come in there to see him, because he was like some reader man. So I see a lot of fancy cars with young men going over there many days before that. And they maybe come back for their money. But then when I listen again, I hear the shots them coming from the other side. And then I heard the police siren in about half an hour. So I came out and I noticed that there were a lot of people going up, and the police them stopped them there. And then I heard the police them saying, "You all come out." And they weren't coming out, and the police them start knocking on the windows them. And then 2 shots were fired again by the police. And they opened the door. The police them went in, soldiers were on the veranda with their gun drawn. And a little after that, I saw them taking out some people in white. But they were in white gowns. And then I saw afterwards a jeep went up close inside the yard of the church. I saw them take Kevin out of the church and put him in the jeep. He was in a, what you call it, not underpants, a shorts, no shirt on, and them just take him and put on the handcuff on him and put him in. He was having attitude with them. He didn't look remorseful. He was telling them what? Jehovah is going to strike them dead and what sort of thing. I never see when they take the body of the lady out of the church. And then I saw the guy who was in charge of, I should say, he's the caretaker for the church. I saw him come out. He was in a sheet. It was a sheet, but he wrapped around him waist. So when they take him out too, and put him in the jeep. The truck came and reversed, and all of them climb up in the truck. They take them away. It was so shameful. They had nothing on except the sheet, the white robe them had on when they climbing up in the truck. The men and the women. It was very sad. I just look at it and say, well, then it's one of those things. You have people coming into Jamaica, say they are pastors and whatever, and they build these church. And after building these churches, they started recruiting Jamaicans to join them.
But how did it come to this? How did a man who once stood behind the pulpit become the center of such a chilling storm? For those who knew Kevin Smith before the headlines, the shock had to settle in. Because once, he wasn't a figure of fear. Once, he was just another preacher trying to build a ministry.
When I was a younger person, I told people that the angel of the Lord appeared to me and told me that I will be a prophet. I was 9 years old.
There was not those signs, that in those early days at all. But this is why we all have to be careful, and we have to be observant in our interactions with others, because once we begin to see where pride begins to rise and dominance on money and on pleasure begins to override life, it begins to be the cues that, hey, be careful here. Is there another spirit that could be operating that one need to be sensitive to? But I hadn't seen him in the last four or 5 years, really, but it is then began to hear a couple of things and he says, careful here, but I didn't know it to be anything going off in that kind of area at all.
There is no human head buried on this land, so that as the maggots come, so people come. But this place has been sanctified, washed in the blood of Jesus.
I know for me it was really quite devastating, because it's someone who I knew, and I had no idea that it had gone into that kind of extreme, and it's on the other side of the island, so I never heard too much of what was going on. So it was really quite devastating and disappointing, needless to say. First thing, of course, I wanted to know, man, is it true? So one certainly had to begin to look to try to wait and to see what really is going down here and to see how much truth is in it. And as it unfolded, when we heard more, then we had to say, oh my goodness, man, clearly something should have been arrested a long time before.
While many wrestled with disbelief and disappointment from afar, those closer to the epicenter had a different reality. For Albion residents, Smith's transformation wasn't subtle. It was loud, constant, and hard to ignore. For Lulin in particular, the signs were glaring, becoming more prominent day after day and louder night after night.
Kevin is a manipulator. He speaks nicely. He has a way of saying things to you that you wonder, how he knows these things. And once I look at him, I said to him, how can you predict what's gonna happen to people if they don't step in your direction? I said, no man, that's not right. And he said, Sister Vicky, he used the word Jehovah. He said, Jehovah and I talk a lot.
You're not supposed to be in your right mind. The struggle you're having is real. There were some people fighting you off a place where you were living some time ago, and still, no matter where you go, there is always a fight for you to live where you are living. In Jesus' name.
One girl I recall, after what took place, one day I saw her passing, going up the road. I stopped her, I called her, I said, just a minute, I want to talk to you, come here. So I was questioning her, asking about what happened with Kevin and so she said to me, she had stopped going there she went there for 3 months and she stopped because she did not like the way Kevin put in demand on them. And some of them, he invites them up to the office. He has a private room up there. So I say, what take place up there? She said, I don't know, because I never decided to go up there, because I had to make appointment to go up there to see him. As a pastor, as a bishop, I said, well, most churches you make appointments to see your pastor. I said, no, not that way, Miss Vicky, I don't know, but something is not right.
Where's I need to talk to you. Is either you find a new man? So why you not coming to church no more?
Because I do the fence and do.
You have fixed fence when you should be at church. Your fence are gonna drop down.
And that's how I get to think Kevin isn't really the person he was supposed to be as a pastor. Kevin had ways in screaming at people. Sometimes over here, me hear him screaming over there, you know. And I say, no man, that can't be Kevin Smith. Yeah.
I've been sent to declare life to all the people of the earth. Hear ye the word of Jesus Christus.
He hacks with people to get people into him. He's very nice. He's intelligent. He speaks nicely. He always have something good to say about somebody he just met, and he described the person to you and say, you maybe know them, you know, ask them about me. I treat them good. What is what he does to take them in.
Was this manipulation or madness? We sought a clinical perspective.
Manipulation is very well known. It's when an individual alters the natural course or the desired course that another individual would opt for. And it is psychologically recognized as a behavior that is typical of control, of seeking to control other individuals. There are different, as most of these symptoms are, there are variations to the severity of it. And likewise, the individual who is the victim will have a variety of presentations that may result from that manipulation. To understand what is happening in the present, you kind of have to relate to probably what happened in the past. Usually so manipulation tends to be one of those features that typify certain what we call personality disorders, or could become even more severe to where there's a loss of touch with reality, with how it is presented. So there could be psychosis, there could be that level of absolute control that it becomes almost unrealistic for somebody who is objectively looking on. The beginnings of these things tend to start in our earlier years, where there is probably some trauma, there's probably some sort of what we call those adverse childhood experiences that impact on the psyche of the ego, the sense of self, that causes someone to compensate in a way to try and protect that sense of self. The compensation is one that seeks to control. So let's say a child was abused, physically, sexually, verbally. In order for that sense of self to still feel good or survive that abuse, they develop what we call defense mechanisms. And you can have healthy defense mechanisms, you can have unhealthy defense mechanisms. Some person may decide to exercise and work it out. That's a healthy way. But another person may seek to, the hurt that they feel, they inflict it on someone else, because that makes them feel better. And so that behavior becomes a part of their personality later on in adulthood. And that now can manifest when they find people who themselves might be vulnerable to that level of control. So the victim may be somebody who themselves were always abused, or themselves had a sad outlook on life, or themselves are wanting in some way. And then the perpetrator basically provides that initially and then takes that to another level of control. I should also add that studies have shown that there are sometimes actual changes in the brain of these perpetrators. You have certain areas of brain called the orbitofrontal cortex. That's kind of in the front of the brain there, that kind of deals with our cognition and our thinking capacities and so forth. The parahippocampal gyrus, which deals with our memories and so forth, and the amygdala, which is that area that tends to deal with aggression and violence. So those areas seem to also be activated, enhanced in some of these individuals.
Understanding manipulation at the psychological level is one thing, but when that manipulation is cloaked in spirituality, it becomes even more potent. Dr. Longmore explains how religion, deeply personal and often rooted in a search for belonging, can amplify vulnerability, especially when guided by a figure in a position of power.
When persons have a vulnerability towards especially their sense of self, sense of value, self-esteem, which can be associated in religious practice, in spiritual practice, people are desirous of guidance. And that guidance can validate themselves in whatever answers they come to. So an individual who seems to be a leader is like basically like taking candy from a baby, so to speak. The level of vulnerability that an individual might be at when they are listening to or taking the guidance of that quote-unquote leader. And so without the basis of morality and that sense of protection in that leader, if that person is someone who was abused, was somehow ill-treated, was somehow manipulated themselves, given that position of authority, you can see how easily someone, a victim, could fall into such situations.
I am your king as long as you pay tribute to me. So the day you stop pay tribute is the day you stop worship. And the day you stop worship, you can't live yourself. Let me give you the understanding. When you have a landlord and the landlord say, you rent my place, as long as you pay your rent, you can stay in peace. The day you stop paying your rent, you have to come out of yourself. So when people said, I can't pay my tithes, which is the worship, God's law said you must, by the sweat of your brow, you must eat bread. Hear what happened with these false prophets today.
If you think about it, the spiritual health is our fourth dimension of health. I mean, our spirituality is actually protected in our constitution and across the globe for a reason, because it is one of the most inherent human tendencies. It is what defines us from other species. It is something that we can't pinpoint exactly, but we know we all belong to something greater than us. We all have a unique purpose. We all, when we start to show love to ourselves, we're able to show love to others. That is our spirituality. And religion is an organized way of pursuing and getting answers that we naturally have. So individuals who are leaders in that, when you have an individual who is naturally wanting answers, almost the first source that provides the answers will be given the most highest regard. This is why our family structure is so important, because it is in our families, and especially families that are grounded, families that are very functional, that you get that level of grounding, pun intended. You get that level of identity. You get that level of guidance as to who you are, what role you may play in society, and your wider involvement in the universe, so to speak. So when you have those broken situations in the beginnings, here comes along somebody who is preaching what you want to hear. You could be vulnerable to such if you're not fully grounded in who you are.
More importantly, Protecting oneself from manipulation requires learning to listen to a deeper internal compass, the quiet signals that something just isn't right.
One of the key things is learning to trust your intuition, learning to sense when something isn't right with your spirit, quote unquote. You know, if I were to liken it, a little turtle is born and hatch out of an egg. Instinctively, that little turtle knows what to do, how to go. We are the most evolved species. So imagine our sense of what to do, our sense of intuition. And a lot of times, especially in abusive relationships, what happens is the other individual is seeking to alter your natural intuition. And however you can learn to develop that, this is why holistic health is important. Yourself physically, socially, emotionally, mentally and spiritually. When you develop those aspects of yourself, you're more in tune with who you are, who you want to be, and you're more able to identify when something is just not right.
He claimed to be building an ark, but what Kevin Smith left behind was not salvation. It was wreckage, a broken church, a trail of victims, and a nation grasping for answers. He died in a crash that raised more questions than it answered. But before his fall, he rose. Not as a prophet, but as the architect of something far more sinister. In part 2, Dead or Alive, cult pastor Kevin Smith, a gripping deep dive into the shadows of manipulation and cult practices, we explore persistent conspiracy theories and confront the haunting question: is Kevin Smith truly dead?